I know a lot of you. I'm just getting to know some of you. But my question, I want to see a show of hands. How many of you are content creators? Let me see those hands. Excellent. Everybody needs to be a content creator right now. Okay? There's a saying in Hollywood, and everybody's hearing it. It's the God's honest truth. Content is king. And it is so true right now. And we all know why, because we're seeing it every day, because we're changing our habits, the way we do things. We're binge watching Netflix. We're, maybe sneaking some in at work. You didn't hear it from me, but we're watching it in the car, on a plane ride, whatever. The world has changed. Okay, so just a little bit about my background. I used to run Celtic Studios here in town, right? And so it's still the largest design-built production facility. You have to go in the Gulf South. You have to go as far east as Atlanta to find a bigger one, as far west as Albuquerque. Okay, but the key word there is facility, and this is kind of what we've been doing as a state. We've been facilitating production, and man, we are good at facilitating production, and I can prove it. How many films do you think have been nominated for Best Picture that were shot in Louisiana over the past 6 years? Close? Close? I heard 5, I heard 4, or 10. Not 10, that's too many. 6. 6 films in the past 6 years were nominated for Best Picture that were shot in Louisiana. Now, can anybody name them?
The Green Book, was that?
Green Book is one?
Two Broad Diamond?
No. 12 Years a Slave.
That was number 2.
The Butler?
No.
Alright.
Django Unchained.
Yes, that's 3. We got 3. All right, we got 3 more.
What was that one with, what did you mention? Normal names.
Dallas Buyers Club. All right, where we go? We have 4 now?
Big Short.
Big Short, 5. All right, there's one more.
Green Lantern?
I could promise you Green Lantern to go. I think I got nominated for a Razzie, actually, like one of the worst films, actually. But all right, well, Beast of the Southern Wild. So that's 6 films in 6 years. 2 of those films actually won Best Picture. You named them both, 12 Years a Slave and Green Book. So what does that tell us? That tells us that we are really good at making movies here, okay? To the point where, I mean, our crews are A-list. Our production facilities are fantastic. We can make anything for anyone. The problem is we're not making enough of our own. Now, I could make the argument The Beast of the Southern Wild was made by Louisiana filmmakers. Now, those are guys from New York who moved to New Orleans and couldn't be anywhere in New Orleans now, but they're not actually from here originally. My point is, though, that at this point in time, this point in history, we need to be making our own films. And again, this is coming from the guy who was the biggest facilitator of them all. I mean, we had Battleship, we had Twilight, we had Oblivion, we had...
Fantastic Four.
We don't want to talk about Fantastic Four. Oh, Lord. But again, that was not my job. My job was not to judge content. I mean, from a money standpoint, hey, that was the gift that kept on giving. I mean, they got there in September of 2013, and they didn't leave completely until May of 2015. And look, they do spend a lot of money when they're here. Don't get me wrong. They put thousands of people in hotel rooms. I mean, we're talking, it's like something crazy, like 14,000 room nights between Twilight and Battleship here in Baton Rouge. I mean, they're putting a lot of money in the local economy, and so there's no question that we want them here. But again, we're at a point in time in history where it's almost a content war going on right now. When I say a content war, you just got to look at the numbers and look at what's going on. Who's got Disney Plus? Did anybody get Disney Plus this week? Okay, they're a huge player.
Yeah.
Right. Netflix, obviously, Amazon, HBO Max is coming out. Universal's got their services called Peacock. I mean, this list just gets bigger and all the time. I think there's there's an article in The Economist, you should read this, came out this past week. 16 different companies that are creating all this content in the U.S. And if you totaled up what they're spending on content in 2019 alone, you know what that number is? About $100 billion. $100 billion, okay? So, that's like the equivalent, according to them, of what's being invested in the oil industry in 2019, okay? Think about this, okay? This is a gold rush of what's going on right now because they're all competing with each other. Who can have the best content? Who can make the biggest case or the best case for you to buy a subscription to their service? And it's not going to go. It's not going anywhere. I mean, just one of these like kind of crazy discussions about what do you see the world being like in 10 years? Okay, I'll tell you what I think. I think that like self-driving cars might be a real thing. Okay, I think that it might be more likely that you're a passenger in a vehicle than you are a driver. And it might be more likely that you've got more time on your hands because of automation. And it might be that wherever you're working, they say, we're going to have a 4-day work week. Okay? The 4-day work week might be a real thing within the next 10 years for most of us. So why are they banking on you having all this time on your hands? Because that's the way the world is moving. And if we have all this time on our hands, what are we going to do? I'm just sorry, but the reality is, as most Americans, we're going to watch something, you know? And so, again, when you're stockpiling content, you start looking, okay, where can I make this content? Where am I going to get the you know, again, you're trying to cut costs because you're competing with your, you know, with everybody else. So obviously they're looking at Louisiana. I mean, Louisiana is not what Georgia is. I mean, Georgia has this unlimited, uncapped program. It's over $1 billion a year. It's not New York. New York has a $420 million a year program. It's not California. It's got a $330 million a year program. We have a $150 million a year program. So that puts us fourth. We are fourth in the nation. Okay? So we need to take advantage of that, right? Now, I'm not going to ask anybody here if you like Trump. I'm not going there, okay? But I will talk about this. Trump reform. There's something called the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Has anybody heard of this thing, Trump reform? Okay. So there's probably good in it and there's bad in it. But there is one good thing for filmmakers, okay? They took something that used to be called Section 181. I don't know if anybody's heard of Section 181, but it was an incentive for people to invest in, I guess, independent films, and it was capped maybe at like 15 million. And the problem with it is you didn't know if you could use it from year to year. It had all kinds of little strings attached and it just didn't work. Well, when Trump reform got passed, somebody was able to lobby them to put something in there to make it work, okay? So they took the guts of Internal Revenue Code Section 181, and they moved it under something called 168K. I mean, I'm talking IRS gobbledygook to you, I'm sure, but go look it up. 168K is a bonus depreciation incentive that a lot of companies around here use because they're like plants. If a plant goes and buys a piece of equipment, let's say Exxon or wherever, and they plug up this equipment, the year in which they plug that equipment up and put it to work, they're able to write it off. People buy airplanes with this incentive, with 168K. As soon as that airplane is put into service, it's a depreciation incentive, okay? What they've done with this film incentive, get this, it is a 100% bonus depreciation incentive for film investors, okay? 100% through the end of 2022, okay? So, we all know about Louisiana, and Susie's been fighting the battles for Louisiana's incentive for a long, long time, okay? And if you were to stack the incentives that are on the books in Louisiana right now, it's close to 40%, okay? If you maximize the whole thing, it's a 40% tax credit. And that's fantastic, okay? But think about this. What if you added that 40% to this federal bonus depreciation incentive, okay? Now what does that mean exactly? People in the highest income tax bracket in the U.S. are paying what? Does anybody know?
40%.
About 40%. It's really about 37%, okay? 37%. So, if you can find that Mr. Moneybags or Uncle Scrooge McDuck or whoever it is that has all this money, and you say, hey, look, I can save you money on your taxes if you'll invest in this film, okay? He says, oh, well, how does that work? Well, the state of Louisiana is offering a 40% tax credit, which can actually be turned into cash. You can actually take that back to the state, and they'll give you 88 cents on the dollar for those tax credits, okay? Or you can use it dollar for dollar against your state income tax, okay? So again, Uncle Scrooge McDuck he's paying the 37% level of the federal government. So on $1 million, he's giving $370,000 to Uncle Sam, and he's got nothing to show for it. Okay. Now, if he invests that money in a film, though, he's going to own an asset. He's not going to just own an asset. He's going to own an asset at a point in time in history when people are dying for content and are buying content right now. Okay. So, if we added, what is 40 plus 37?
77.
I'm gonna take it one step further. In Louisiana, our federal income tax is tied to our state income tax, so that if you reduce your federal, you can also reduce your state. That's a 6%. We pay 6% at the highest income tax level in Louisiana. Okay? So let's add it all up. 40% plus 37% plus 6% is what? 83%. There are certain situations where you could raise money for a film and 83% is covered by state and federal incentives. Okay? Like, you don't have to actually make money. You could make half your money back on this film and you could actually make a profit. I know that sounds crazy, but go look it up. IRC 168K, the current Louisiana film incentive, and then just ask somebody, like, you know, how it works with federal and state income taxes. Okay, that was just a long way of saying this. There has never been a better time to be a content creator than right now. Okay? Now, again, if you're a content creator, you know, again, there's not a magic formula. I don't have like this magic bullet or some secret connection or whatever. But we do know a couple of things. Like, some stories sell, some stories don't. Some things are in demand. I mean, you can kind of tell these things on your own. But a script by itself is probably not going to, it could get you somewhere, but it's not going to really do it. You got to get something else behind it. So if you got money behind it, that's usually the fastest way to make this thing go. Okay? Because then you can attach talent. You can find actors and actresses or directors or whatever. I mean, money helps a lot. So again, you have everything working in your favor from a government standpoint, from the state and federal, because you can even borrow against what the state is offering. There are companies out there like Forest Road who will charge you 10%, but they will loan you in advance whatever it is that you're borrowing against on the state. I mean, again, there's nothing stopping you from a government standpoint. It is all out there, and it has never been better. I almost think it feels like an accident that the federal government would offer this up. But I understand why they're doing it. Because we don't want all those jobs going to Canada. And we don't want all those jobs going to China. And we want to keep it here in the U.S. And that's a big part of it. 75% has to be spent in the U.S., okay? I mean, there's other things too. I mean, this is where you actually need a CPA on your side to figure these things out. Let's talk about Scrooge McDuck. Scrooge McDuck probably needs to have passive income. Active income is basically, like, say I dunk basketballs for a living. I mean, that's active income. But let's say I get mailbox money. How many actors do we have here? Some of you may know about that mailbox money. Have you ever got, you know, residuals or something? I know a guy who did a nationwide auto insurance group. You know Richard Zerang, don't you?
Yeah, Richard.
He did I guess it was to a SAG job or whatever, but his commercial, he forgot he had done it almost, and it aired during the Super Bowl. He opened up his mailbox, had a check for $18,000. You know, it happens. So, point being is that's what we need as a state. That definitely doesn't get measured as far as economic impact, because nobody's like going around and asking people like, what are you getting out of the mailbox? But that's a huge part of the industry, especially in California, especially in New York. We've got to make it a bigger part of the industry here. Mailbox money. That's what it's all about. And again, you can use this tax, this incentive, this federal deduction against that mailbox money, passive income. Now, there are people who tell you there's a way you can do it against active income as well. That's a long conversation with a CPA. But I'm just telling you, again, there has never been a better time to be a content creator than right now. And I say that too because on the state side, if you are a Louisiana screenwriter, the entire project can get an additional 10% on everything if the screenwriter is from the state of Louisiana. That's a big deal. That gives you a leg up, you know. In fact, has anybody ever published something on the Blacklist? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So the Blacklist is a website where you can take your script or whatever, and you can put it up there. I forget what it costs. Is it $30 a month per script or something? But believe it or not, agencies, maybe even Netflix or whoever, they are looking through the Blacklist to see good ideas and like who's got a great script. And if it's good enough, they may call you up and say, hey, I'd like to option this property, or I'd like to buy it from you, you know? And so it makes sense to think about getting on something like the Blacklist. That said, I told the Blacklist, y'all need to have a Louisiana section, because anybody that does a Louisiana, you know, a screenwriter, and they do it in Louisiana, they're going to get an additional 10% on a project that's up to, I think, $10 million. So that's a very big deal. So you've got everything working in your favor by being a Louisiana content creator right now. So you just kind of have to get out there and do it, I guess. I don't know. I've talked enough. Y'all do Q&A?
That 10% is part of the 40 that you mentioned?
It is part of the 40, yeah. The max that you can get in Louisiana is 40. You can't get past 40. There's basically a 25 across the board for everything, okay? There's an additional 5, if you will, base outside of New Orleans. So that gets you to 30. And if you do the Louisiana screenwriter, the additional 10, that gets you to 40. But there's also an additional 15 for all the Louisiana residents that are on your payroll. Geez, there's a 5 that hardly ever gets used for visual effects if you're spending your visual effects money in Louisiana. But just point being is you can't go past 40. The goal is to try to get to 40.
What's the minimum? What is the least amount you can spend on a film to?
Good question. It used to be $300,000 before 2017, I believe. But if you're a Louisiana filmmaker, now it's $50,000. So the threshold has been lowered.
With the screenwriter tax credit, does the 10% also apply to non-union projects, or is it just WGA?
Oh, you don't have to be WGA. I think you just have to prove you're a Louisiana resident and you've been here paying taxes. I think that's the main thing. It helps to be a WGA screenwriter. It certainly can't hurt.
Does it apply to any short-form projects like shorts or web series or anything like that?
I'm not sure that it doesn't. I think that it does, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, in fact, yeah, it does apply to shorts.
Trump's contribution, was that because of Secretary Mnuchin and how entertainment recently surpassed Boeing as our #1 export out of this country?
That's a really good question, but I don't know. but I do know that everybody sees the writing on the wall that the demand for content is not going away. It is only going to grow, and it's only going to grow because of technology and streaming and just the extra time that we have on our hands and foreign markets. I mean, my gosh, I mean, you know, I can guarantee there's some kid in China watching something that was shot in the U.S. right now.
Yeah, there's actually a huge market in Europe for American English language films as a language learning tool. There are actually theaters in Europe that specialize in oddball little films.
Yeah. No, there's a market for it. I mean, that's all I can say about just about everything. There's a market for it because everybody's got access to streaming. Yes, Nick.
Well, Patrick, thanks for sharing your insights. In your experience these days, what's the rough turnaround time for people getting money back? So they invest, they're looking into the rebates from Louisiana. Roughly what kind of window would you say is reasonable to expect to get that money back?
Well, so it's not maybe ideal, but it is what it is. And it's kind of like, it's sort of not that far off from the way it used to be. You know, we have these caps now, like these issuance caps and redemption caps, right, on the program now. So that we have all these giant scripted television series that are, you know, already in line. So you do have to navigate that. That said, it's going to, from the point that you put in your application, to the point that you actually have a finished product or you submit your audit, it's over a year, right? I mean, that's usually a year-long process. They're telling people, I think right now, it's closer to 2, so that by the time you actually are like, you have the audit, they've issued your credits, the wait is less than a year from the point that when you actually have your credits issued to you. So Is there a situation where you might have to wait like close to a year? Yeah, but I think there are also things where independent filmmakers get to skip to the front of the line. There's a $15 million bucket out of the 150 that could be taken advantage of by independents, so it doesn't all get gobbled up.
So potentially a year to 2 years.
A year to 2 years.
Practically speaking, for
Practically
many
speaking, yeah.
filmmakers.
If you be conservative, I'd say 2 years. Oh, come on, there's got to be more than that.
Any more questions?
I'm just curious to hear about the Celtic Studios. So, what's one of the reasons you left after it was doing so well?
What's the question?
Okay, well, that's a long story, but
Oh,
okay.
is it a long story?
It was doing very well. Okay, the first half of 2015 was amazing. We had 3 scripted TV series. We had in Baton Rouge. We had Scream, was on MTV. We had Underground, was on WGN. We had Happen Leonard here in town. We still had the Fantastic Four reshoots, the gift that kept on giving. So we had that. North of town, we had the Magnificent Seven. So they built an entire western town, like Chris Pratt, Denzel Washington, all that. I mean, it's a big deal. So Baton Rouge was just on fire in the first half of 2015. Well, price of oil plummets. The revenue that Louisiana is taking in from that causes the state budget to get into a bind. They get into such a bind in, say, June of 2015, and remember Bobby Jindal was running for president and refused to raise taxes. And so they were in such a bind, they thought, well, here's a solution. Let's just put a cap on this program and take $70 million away from it right away and we're good. And it was just like, oh, it doesn't work like that, because they didn't realize that they already owed over $500 million. Okay, and so when Hollywood would say, like, so how long is it going to take for me to get my credits? You have to tell them it could be 3 to 4 years, and they were like, yeah, no thanks. So everything came to a screeching halt in the last half of 2015. To put it in perspective, the last day of photography at Celtic was on August 14th of 2015 for Underground. Okay. We sat entirely empty until August 14th of 2016 when we had that big flood here in town and we had to take in all those evacuees. So that just puts it in perspective that we sat completely empty. I mean, it's weird, but to the day, completely empty for 1 year. Okay. So in my head, it's like, okay, I don't want to be the Maytag repairman. Just waiting for somebody to come that's not going to come or whatever. I was hoping that they would fix the incentives, and they did, but it wasn't a sure thing. And just basically, I don't want to be 50 years old trying to rent stage and office space to people from outside of the state. It kind of dawned on me that, the state has to evolve, and I kind of needed to evolve with it. We can't just be content facilitators. We can't just be, the people who roll out the red carpet. We make sure you have a great experience, and in the end, you're happy and you spend a bunch of money, but in the end, we don't own any of that. We have to evolve as a state, and I guess that's kind of like, all right, I want to go on this trip. I want to see where this takes. So I started off trying to executive produce a few things before I went to work went back to the state to work. Because I actually worked for the state before I worked for Celtic, but it was kind of like one of those decisions where it's like, somebody's got to do this. So that's how I ended up back with LED, basically, trying to help us make that turn, so we're not just facilitating. We're still great at facilitating, and again, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that at the end of the day, we want that mailbox money, those residuals. We need to own that content, because as you can see, if they're spending $100 billion on content, the people who are really making money are the ones who own the rights to it.
And what is LED, and what do independent filmmakers have to do to rent space at Celtic? I'm new to Baton Rouge,
Okay,
so all
sure.
of this is new to me.
LED is Louisiana Economic Development. So it's a state agency that's there to create jobs and incentivize business to come to Louisiana. It's a job creator agency. What was your other questions about Celtic?
What do
So it's the one thing they do have right now is a TV series called Paradise Lost. It's on the Paramount Network. I don't know that it's aired yet. I don't think it's
No, it hadn't aired. They're still shooting, I think.
Okay, I think they wrapped recently on the Baton Rouge side of things, whatever. They are holding sets through next year. They're planning on coming back, I think. So, but I don't know that they'd be back necessarily shooting probably until the spring. So when that comes back, you'll definitely have something. I know they're trying to land another TV series right now, so that they'd have something kind of in between, which would be good. There's smaller independent stuff happening like all the time. I mean, be on the lookout for these Christmas movies. I tell you, that's the hot new thing. Christmas movies. I got a friend named Daniel Lewis. He used to make Swamp Shark and Ghost Shark and Goat Shark movies.
Christmas wish was coming. And
Now they're making Lifetime movies and Hallmark Channel movies.
A whole
And,
bunch of them that were shot here.
oh yeah, people can't get enough of them. So there was another Christmas movie that shot recently called Racing Family Christmas. Did you do
Yes.
that?
Yeah, no, that's the one.
Yeah. Is it shooting right now or they?
My understanding is they finished shooting.
Okay.
I was on it for a few days.
Oh, there you go. So, but I keep hearing those things are going to keep coming. I mean, just the demand for those. The Hallmark Channel's running Christmas movies right now. You know, so the demand like doesn't go away. People just want to see
Lifetime, too.
Lifetime too. Yeah.
Yeah. And you have NCIS is a lot.
NCIS has been our. That's
TV.
another gift that keeps on giving. It's been here for a while. Yeah, there's a ton of TV in New Orleans. I mean, there are 12 productions shooting and prepping in New Orleans right now. So, I mean, you're not that far if you want to hop on a ship. Queen Sugar, Claws, what else?
How do you get on those? Is there like you mentioned the blacklist?
On the acting side?
No, not the accent, just anything.
Oh,
on the
just
set,
like-
behind the scenes.
Well, so the IATSE, the Local 478, I mean, that's like most positions, like, you could call them right now and just say, hey, look, I'm interested in, joining it. I mean, you got to figure out what department you want to work in and all that, or whatever. But I mean, they're always looking to add, good people. I mean, you can always work non-union on things if you can. I mean, it all depends. I mean, non-union is going to be pretty much anything $1 million.
Any more questions?
I have just one more, and this is way off topic, but you mentioned the historic flooding in Celtic. Have you considered, because you were the spearhead, you were the guy who responded before the government could, and had, you called for volunteers and you opened up Celtic for the refugees.
Yeah.
Have you considered writing, or has writing a story or a film about that? Because I think that's a great story. I mean, that's a Lifetime movie right there. So is that, you don't think it would work?
Only if they get Brad Pitt to play me. I don't know.
Let's get the
Hey,
standing ovation.
got Willem Dafoe.
Hey, why don't you play you? You should play you, right?
You pay you.
No. I'm not paying to see that.
Look, I mean, you had the majority of your volunteers were background actors. They'll come and work again. Create your own content.
That's very kind.
Do it.
I might ask the question, in your role, what do you do that we might engage with one another with?
Well, that's a good question. I need y'all to be the ambassadors of everything that I was just talking about with, again, we need to own the industry versus rent the industry. Okay? So if you know somebody who might be a potential investor, talk to them about it. Say, hey, look, have you ever looked at the Louisiana tax code? Have you ever looked at this, again, Internal Revenue Code 168K, I mean, and thought about have you ever thought about getting in the movie business yourself? I mean, they call this an alternative investment. It's not like, investing in the stock market or real estate or whatever. It's a little different. But again, with $100 billion out there right now buying up that much content, there's just never been a better time to do it. So it's kind of like if you know people who are interested, talk to them about it, I mean, there's no shortage of people who are looking for money, especially in Louisiana. But, and then the other side is true too. Hollywood is looking for good content. They want good stories. If you got something that's just that good, and you could get it from somebody, I mean, especially if you can find a champion. Sometimes you can find an actor or somebody who might want to get behind it. Somebody told me the magic formula for raising money is 80% ROI, 20% heart. Okay? Because you can invest in anything, but if you've got that kind of emotional attachment, something you feel strongly about, whatever, then it's more likely somebody's going to loosen the purse strings. So. don't know if that answered your question.
Oh, Patrick, is there any way to do run across what those laws are so we can spread this across the state of Louisiana? Some content creators. I want to thank you very much, and it's been a beautiful presentation.